So now that we have the data that we want on a clean page, we're going to go through how do we then do something with this data? How do we take an average? How do we plot this data? And in this tutorial, we're going to look at how we can make a smaller table with some average values, maybe median values, standard deviation, etc. Some very, very basic statistical analysis. So maybe I'm interested in alkalinity. And I noticed here that there's just a lot of alkalinity information. So it doesn't really make sense to make the data in a table by day because there's just too much information to do that. But maybe it makes sense to sort it by year. So first thing I want to do is make it so I can visually see each year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight manually the years that I'm interested in. I'm going to go by decade. And here I'm selecting the 1970s. So I put a box around all the 1970s data. I'm going to come up to borders, click on the little arrow, which gives me options, and I'm going to click thick box border. And I'm also, just to highlight it even more, I'm going to come over to this paint can, which is essentially fill color. So it's what the background of my cell is going to look like. I'm going to click on the little arrow, and I'm going to fill it with yellow. So now I can see clearly there's my 1970s alkalinity data. And I'm going to do the same thing for the 1980s. Scroll down. There's lots and lots of 1980s data. So I'm going to highlight and continue to scroll down until I get to the end of the 1980s. Oops, and I messed up. I'm going to have to re-grab it again because I clicked on a outside cell. So come all the way back up, reselect all that data. I'm going to again click on the little arrow, put a thick box border, and then I'm going to click on the arrow next to my paint can, and I'm going to fill this one in light green. And I've already done the same thing for the 1990s and then all the way down for 2000. So I'm going to eyeball this data and kind of make sure that nothing looks out of sorts. And the first thing I notice is, man, this one right here has a lot of decimal points. I don't really think that's probably significant, especially since all of the other numbers have no decimal points or nothing beyond 3 significant figures. So what I'm going to do actually to fix that is I'm going to come up here I'm going to click on all the Y data. And I'm going to come over to these little boxes that you'll notice if I click on increase the number of decimal places, it'll continue to add decimal places. But I'm going to actually click on decrease the number of decimal places until all of my data have no decimal places. And now you'll notice the cell is really big and wide because I added all those decimal points. So I'm going to come over here to the edge of my cell with my line and my 2 arrows, and I'm going to double click. And it's either going to make it, in this case it made it bigger because there's some data down below with more variables, but I'm going to come in here and shrink it. Okay, so now my data is organized, and I want to make a smaller table with some average values. So I'm going to come in here and make the headers for my table. So I'm going to have alkalinity, and this is going to be average in milligrams per liter. I'm going to come up here, double click, and make my cell wide enough to hold that. And I'm going to put 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. So now what I can do is I can come in here and I can basically choose the average value for all my 1970s data. And to do that, I click on the cell where I want the average value to be. I come up to my function box and I click in the text space, so the white box there. And I'm going to put equals average and a parenthesis. And now you'll see Excel will actually tell you what to do. You need to put number 1, number 2, number 3, all the different numbers that you want. And so what you can do is you can actually click on all the cells that you want to come up with an average with. So I'm interested in all of these cells in yellow. So I click on the first one, hold the button down, and drag it to the bottom of my 1970s data and hit enter. So this tells me that the average alkalinity for the 1970s was 183. And I can do the exact same thing for the 1980s and 1990s. So, and 2000s. So I come in here, click on the cell, come up to the function box, equals average, and now I'm going to select my average data. Now there are some hacks to make this simple if your data size has the same number of sample points each year, but since our data, we don't know if it has the same number of points, we're going to do all of this manually. So come in here, I hit enter, and you'll notice it gave me my average alkalinity. I'm going to do the same thing for the 1990s. And then the same thing for the 2000s. Come in here. Oh, I was just double checking that I had put in my function. I forgot if I had done that. So come in here and grab my 1990s data. So it's all the purple. By highlighting it in a certain color, since all the purple data, I just think it visually can speed things up and kind of help me do this, crunch through this a little bit faster than maybe I could if it wasn't that way. Now I'm going to do the same thing for 2000s equals average. Whoop. Going through too fast. And I'm going to select average data for 2000s. Continue, continue, continue. So once we get all this done, I'm going to show you an easy hack if you then want to look at the same numbers that we just grabbed, but look at a different variable. Maybe you're interested in median or maximum value, or maybe you're interested in the standard deviation or something like that. To save us time so we don't have to come through and keep selecting all that data, we actually can do something in Excel that tells Excel that I want to always have the same data. And what we could do is put, so if we're up here, if we're up here and we click on the 2000s, if I put a $sign in front of the letter and the number, that tells Excel that no matter what function I might do, I always want to pull from that column and that row. So for example, maybe I'm interested in alkalinity median in milligrams per liter. And what I could do to save me some time is drag this down, click on it, and come up here, and instead of average, I'm interested in median. And now that gave me the median or the 50th percentile data. But let's say over here I want to do the same thing. So I click on my cell, I get my little black cross here, and I pull it down. What this is doing now is taking the median of Y415 to Y810. Whereas if you notice, this is giving me the average of Y414 to Y809. Essentially, it pulled all of the data down by 1. And that's because I didn't put those $signs in front. So if I come in here back up to the average value and I put my $sign in front of the letter and in front of the number, now I'm only pulling from that data set. And I can drag this as many times down as I want, and it's always pulling from Y414 to Y809. You'll notice all of these are pulling the same data. So now I come in here, I'm just going to clear these out. I come in here and I change this from average to median. And I'm going to do the same thing 2 more times. So I have to come in here, put my $signs to make sure I'm always pulling the same data. Oops. Anytime, by the way, if you saw what I just did, I accidentally clicked on another cell, it's going to add that cell into my data, and I don't want that there, so I'm actually going to delete what I just added in. Come in here, do the same thing, put my $signs in. Okay. So now what if I come in here and I'm looking at these 1980s data, and let's say I forget to put a $sign in front of one of them. What essentially is that going to change? pull it down. What that did was it didn't allow the first one to be modified because I had my dollar signs, but it did allow that last one to be modified. So instead of going from Y21 to Y413, it went from Y21 to Y414. So it did make a difference just for getting that $1 sign. So I'm going to come back in here, fix it, and I'm going to pull them both down. But I'm going to go back in and again change it from average to median. And now that the dollar signs are in, I can continue to do this and do something else. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to change this from median to standard deviation. So how varying is my data? Notice it's too long, so I'm going to come up here, double click, and widen my cell again. And I'm going to actually highlight all 4 of these, click on the little box in the corner that gets me my black hashtag, and pull them all down. And what that did was pulled all of this data down into the next cell. And remember, my dollar signs are there, so I know it's pulling the right data. But now instead of median, I'm going to do standard deviation, which is STDEV. Do it again. One more time. And at this point, my data is a little bit more cleaned up. It's a little bit easier to read. And I can come in here and kind of just about do whatever I want. So if I wanted to put borders around here to make it kind of more aesthetically pleasing, I can come in and make different borders. I can do borders internally. So let's say I'm selecting those. I come over to my borders and I go to border options. And maybe I'm interested in putting kind of dashed lines inside the cells. Maybe I want to bold all of my dates or center all of my numbers. I can highlight them and click center. But you can do just about whatever you want at this point with your tables. And that's how to organize and make tables.